And so one of the things that we see is that an overwhelming number of couples are experiencing the pain of infidelity. And I want to stop right there, park there, and deal with that, because this is a huge issue that's crippling our churches. And oftentimes when we're thinking about infidelity, sometimes we're so one-track minded in the sense of just thinking about the sexual component. But there are other components in mind that take place with an affair or with infidelity, and I want to share with you what those stages are to see if your relationship is in a vulnerable position because you have experienced it or are on the verge of experiencing it. So when you're dealing with infidelity, you have to understand that there are 4 classes of an affair, or 4 types of an affair. The first class, or the first type of an affair, is what we would call the one-night stand. So this is an individual that goes on a business trip or goes out of town on vacation or goes to Vegas, goes to Cancun, wherever it is, and there's nothing emotional, there's nothing relational. It is a one-time occurrence that is drenched in lust, sexual desire, and you're just there to be physically pleased. Sometimes you don't exchange names or just the first name. Sometimes you don't want to know anything about a person. They're just there to give you some form of physical, sexual stimulation, and you move about your business. Now, that is a crushing experience and blow that can take place in a marriage. But the way that you restore your marriage is very different than if you experience a different type of an affair. I will say, of all of the affairs that you could ever experience, that would probably be the easiest to bounce back from, though it is not easy. The second class of an affair is what we call emotional entanglement. Now, this is where many of us get caught up in. Because when dealing with emotional entanglement, you must understand that it doesn't mean that if there's an emotional affair that it always leads to sex. Sometimes it can lead to sex, but sometimes it doesn't. So if in our minds we're defining an affair or defining infidelity as a sexual experience, then many of us can be in inappropriate relationships, not realizing that it's causing a potential harm and damage to our relationship. But we'll get there in a second. But just in terms of the emotional affair, I often say that an affair doesn't begin in the bedroom, it ends in the bedroom. And what happens is, if you're in an emotional affair or you're experiencing what is called an emotional connection with someone outside of your marriage, let's just say you have a job and you're spending quality time with a coworker and you're able to share and talk about the weekend and talk about your interests and talk about politics,
Right.
and then over the course of time, a relationship and rapport is developed, it can lead to an emotional affair.
Right, it's very sneaky, because you'll find that you might be in a relationship with someone of the opposite sex. You may have been in relationship with them for years, but maybe it had not become a problem for your spouse until recent, because of whatever reason. When you have an issue letting go of something or someone, regardless of how your spouse feels, that can be considered an emotional affair. You refuse to let go, you have an emotional attachment. There, whatever it is that you're identifying within that person, that he makes you feel good or she makes you feel good, or you can talk to that person in a way that you can't talk to your spouse. If you can't let that person go, regardless of what your spouse is saying or feeling, that's an emotional affair.
Now, a couple of weeks ago, we actually wrote an article that was published online, and it was dealing with the 17 telltale signs that you've entered into an inappropriate relationship, which can ultimately lead to affairs. And one thing that we've discovered is that one of the biggest challenges that couples struggle with is this whole idea and concept of an opposite sex friend. Now, there are 2 schools of thought. One school of thought says, there's nothing wrong with having a friend. I mean, to be honest with you, I had, a friend before I even met you. We go all the way back to, middle school, elementary school, high school, and it's just a platonic relationship. And so I'm not giving up my friend just because we're in a committed relationship, right? And so that works for many couples. Then you have another school of thought that says there's no way on the planet Earth that I'm going to allow you to engage in a relationship, a rapport, communication with another person of the opposite sex, because this represents the primary relationship for the both of us. So if you're going to spend quality time with Jane, you might as well spend that quality time with me. Could you imagine? Here we are on the couch watching TV, and all of a sudden my phone rings, and I pick up the phone, and it's Clara, and I'm just talking to Clara about life and about whatever. And I'm like, all right, Danielle, I'm going to go out to the movies with Clara. We'll be back in a couple hours. Could you imagine that? That would be crazy. But what happens is because there aren't walls, if you will, of protection in the relationship, many of us are entering into what we call inappropriate relationships with members of the opposite sex. Now, by definition alone, you have to understand what the word platonic means, because within the definition, it presents a problem. By definition, platonic means to have an intimate and affectionate relationship with a member of the opposite sex void of sexuality. Now, I don't know how intimate you can be. I don't know how affectionate you can be with a member of the opposite sex without there being a temptation for something more to develop or to ensue in that type of dynamic. So the word itself is problematic.
And even if it's not a sexual attraction, because there are many people that have opposite sex friends where there isn't a sexual attraction, but there can still be betrayal. Because if you have issues with your spouse and you're going to that person all the time with your business, dragging your spouse's name in the street, telling him or her that they ain't no good, then that's betrayal, and that is infidelity. And so it's not necessarily always a sexual thing. It could just be you are using that person as a way to vent, to vent all the stuff that you're that's going on in your relationship, and it just circumvents the process of healing.
And so there are a couple of indicators that I want to quickly read to you to give you an idea to check your own outside relationships to see if they're inappropriate. Number one, you wait to share your conversations with your friend. So in essence, we've been in a relationship for 12 years, going on 13 years. I mean, it's just like, what is there left to talk about? I mean, what?
Plenty.
And so I go to work, and now Hafiza is at work, and this is a new relationship, and there's 1,001 things to talk about. And so I almost short-circuit any type of interaction with my wife because I already know what she's going to say before she says it. I already know her views. I already know her ideas. But now I have a sense of newness with this other individual, and I seek out those type of conversations that I no longer can have with my partner. And understand that the core of all communication is intimacy, right? So if intimacy means intimacy, I'm allowing someone else to see inside of me while I take the time to see inside someone else's mind, hearts, emotions, vulnerabilities. And so that causes the inappropriate type of relationship. Understand this in terms of other indicators. Number two, you discuss your relationship problems with your friend. That is the absolute worst thing that you can ever do. When you begin to share the difficulties that you have with your spouse, with a member of the opposite sex, what happens is that other individual begins to empathize.
Yes.
They begin to really understand your perspective, and they're there for you, and they begin to accommodate your feelings and your thoughts. And so when they're sharing their difficulties with you, what happens is all of a sudden, wow, we do have things in common. We're going through the same thing. And so all of these artificial intimacy type of connections begin to transpire between these platonic friends, and now they've developed a bond with each other that you no longer have with your own partner. Another indication, your friend discusses, no, I just said that, you start making comparisons between your partner and your friend. So if my partner is not the type to be open to the things that are interesting to me, but I find someone else who shares commonalities with me. Now I'm frustrated that my wife won't do what this friend will do, and so I naturally glean from this relationship because I'm getting more out of this person than I am from my own partner. So I'm making internal comparisons. Another major issue in terms of an inappropriate relationship with a member of the opposite sex is that you cut off all forms of communication that you're having with your friend from your partner. Now, this is where social media and the internet and phones come into play, because we've seen how technology has literally destroyed people's marriages. Simply opening up a Facebook account can potentially be harmful to your relationship. In fact, there was a study done of all of the divorces in the United States, And when certain divorce attorneys were interviewed, they said an overwhelming majority of a lot of the divorces that kind of were impacted by infidelity were because of Facebook, because of Twitter, because of social media. And so a lot of times what happens is we don't even acknowledge our partner in social media. And so I've had several couples that have come to me that are living completely separate lives on Facebook, and there's no indication that they're married, that they had children, because there's no evidence of it on Facebook.
No pictures, yeah. I've seen many pages where a spouse, they don't have any pictures of their children, any pictures of their spouse, all these opposite sex friends down the page commenting and conversing. And you know what? I've even had the experience of, past relationship people connecting to me on Facebook or whatever social media platform and not knowing. So that can cause conflict, because if you're not aware of the people that you're accepting, if you're just going down accepting, you can be accepting all kinds of past relationships that you shouldn't be connecting to.
Now, what happens when you're intentional in reconnecting? Because you know what? It's safe. It's on the internet, right? They live 1,000 miles away. And so it's okay to check up, see how, such and such is doing. And what happens is, statistically, it's been said that when two individuals who have a past relationship with one another connect on the internet, particularly Facebook, within 30 minutes, those emotions come back. Because your brain has an emotional memory, and it remembers the feelings, it remembers the intensity of the moments that you've shared, and so all of a sudden you're feeling a particular way from a casual, platonic conversation that went too far. And after 30 days of communication with this former partner or love interest from the past, it increases the probability of an affair taking place. So oftentimes, the social media platforms and the internet acts as an emotional attachment that can oftentimes become physical. Now, when you're experiencing an emotional connection with someone else other than your partner, that is probably one of the hardest types of affairs to bounce back from, because it's more than just refusing to no longer engage in physical interaction. It's more than just no longer, coming together and being in each other's presence. You're talking about a heart issue. So if you're still thinking about that person and dreaming about that person, and now your heart is perplexed because you have an attachment to your existing partner, an attachment to this other person, and your heart is confused, your thoughts are confused, your mind is confused, and all of a sudden you begin to show up less and less and less, not physically, but emotionally in your own relationship, because you didn't put up the proper boundaries and borders in that marriage. And so emotional entanglement is something very difficult to bounce back from, but it can happen. The third type of an affair that many individuals are impacted by is what we call sexual compulsion. That is when there is some intense sexual desire beyond my control, and I'm constantly thinking about sex and have to have sex, but not only sex 2, 3, 4 times a week, but every single day, twice a day, 3 times a day. And even though my partner is giving as much as she can give, her sexual desire is not as great as mine. So she no longer can satisfy me the way I need to be satisfied. So this lust and this desire drives me out of my marriage into the street to connect with anyone I can in order to get this lustful desire met. Sexual compulsion. The way that you restore a relationship in that manner is completely different than a one-night stand, than emotional entanglement, and even with the fourth type of affair. The fourth type of an affair is what we would call an open-ended relationship. An open-ended relationship simply means there are issues and challenges within your marriage that we've addressed on several occasions, and for whatever reason, it has not been resolved. And because you can no longer give me what it is that I'm looking for, I will either intentionally or unintentionally find someone else who will meet a need that you cannot.
I was just so into what you were saying. That's so real. I mean, thank God we never experienced anything like that. But there are many couples that we deal with that are so broken and so hurt and feel that there's nothing left in their relationship that they just walk out. They walk out and they go in search of the thing that they've neglected to receive in their own relationship.